Hello, Michigan Realtors, and welcome back to the Letter of the Law. We wanted to touch base with this installment because the deadline for implementing the August 17th practice changes is rapidly approaching. Because the 17th falls on a Saturday, some MLSs are implementing the changes early, so it will be very important to stay attuned to what your particular MLS is requiring and when. As you know, Michigan Realtors has previously released updated listing contracts and buyer agency contracts to comply with the NAR settlement agreement. As part of the forthcoming practice changes, Realtors must use settlement-compliant forms with all of their new clients. But what about current clients? That is, buyers and sellers who already have a contract with your brokerage firm. First of all, if that buyer or seller enters into a binding purchase agreement before August 17th, then the offer of compensation through the MLS has already been accepted and the agency contracts do not need to be changed. However, if there is not a binding purchase agreement, then those active listing contracts and buyer agency contracts must be replaced or amended. Again, Michigan Realtors has previously released updated contracts which are compliant with the settlement agreement and which may be substituted for the active but potentially not compliant contracts. Some members have indicated that for their existing clients, they would prefer to amend rather than replace their existing contracts. While it is not possible to prepare a form amendment that works for any listing contract or any buyer agency contract, we have prepared amendments that work for the Michigan Realtors listing contracts, Forms B and BB respectively, and the buyer agency forms, Forms J and JJ. These forms for amendment are included in the description and available in the Michigan Realtors Forms library. Keep in mind that these amendments are for a very limited purpose. They should only be used for clients who have signed a Michigan Realtors listing or buyer-broker contract that predates the form revisions we circulated in mid-July. Members are of course free to adapt the Michigan Realtors amendments for use with their own agency contracts. That said, if you are working with a buyer but do not have a written agreement, you cannot use an amendment and will need to use a new settlement-compliant buyer agency contract. Amending the listing contract. One benefit of using an amendment rather than a wholly new contract is that this may make it easier to discuss the changes with your client. It also provides a new opportunity to emphasize your value to your seller client. On the listing side, sellers should understand that commissions are negotiable and not set by law. This, of course, has always been the case, but the settlement agreement requires that this now be conspicuously spelled out in the listing contract. Sellers should also understand that whether the listing broker will offer to pay compensation to buyer's brokers, and if so, the amount of that offer, is wholly up to the seller. And 3, if the seller does direct the listing broker to offer compensation to buyer's brokers, that offer cannot be made through the MLS, but must be made via a separate agreement between the listing broker and the buyer's broker. And 4, buyers who are obligated to pay their buyer's broker may submit offers that ask the seller to assume all or a portion of that obligation, either directly or included as part of seller concessions. This is a contractual matter between the buyer and the seller that would be negotiated as part of the purchase agreement. Amending the buyer agency agreement. On the buyer agency side, buyers should understand that Realtors can no longer work with a buyer, even show them a house, without a written agreement. And the amount of compensation to be paid to the buyer's broker must be negotiated between the buyer and the buyer's broker as part of that written agreement. The compensation to be paid to a buyer's broker is not set by law and is fully negotiable. And the buyer will be contractually obligated to pay the entire agreed upon amount unless the listing broker or the seller agrees to assume all or part of the buyer's obligation. Now, the amendments discussed and provided in this video are intended to provide a bridge to make the practice changes more easily navigated. Please don't hesitate to contact Michigan Realtors with any questions regarding the forthcoming practice changes and how the forms should operate. Until next time, thanks for watching and good luck out there.